Okay. Right. Well, that's 7 o'clock, so I think we'll begin. Everyone's very welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the fourth of this year's Community Conversation webinar series, organised by the Chitterslow Committee of Llangollen Town Council. For those of you joining, please be aware that this event is being recorded. My name is Robin Lovelock. I'm one of the town councillors and chair of Chitterslow Llangollen. In case you've not heard of Chitterslow, or have heard but you're not sure what it's about, Chitterslow is an international network of over 200 towns, all committed to a slower and more caring way of life, along with economic, social and environmental sustainability. It started in Italy and has expanded from there, and Llangollen was awarded Chitterslow town status in 2013. This was on a result of coordinated effort by residents and councillors at the time. And the status really recognised the town efforts around economic, social and environmental sustainability, as well as our unique heritage and our particularly caring attitude towards visitors and residents alike, as we've very much seen through the past couple of years of managing the coronavirus pandemic. And I think I've said this a few times, but I always like to take the chance to say that I really do feel that Llangollen is a Chitterslow town in its very DNA. Where other towns maybe have to work towards it, it's something that we live daily through the 100 or so groups that make our town what it is. So with each of these webinars, each considering a different Chitterslow theme, we speak with members of various town groups to hear what they're up to. And we've invited speakers from elsewhere to share inspiring ideas from further afield. Some of the ideas may be familiar and others new, but we hope that the speakers together provoke discussion and provoke some discussion, and if there's interest, there'll be time for questions once they've finished. So this evening we have three speakers who will each speak for 10 minutes. First, we'll hear from Stephen Johnson from Llandine Dairy and Farm. Then we'll hand over to Duncan Fisher from Our Food down in Brecon Beacons. And thirdly, we'll hear from Ros from Grow Llangollen. So we'll hear what they have to say, and I'll keep them on time with a 1-minute warning. If you do have questions or comments, please feel free to use the comment function, which should be somewhere around your screen, often at the top. And then we'll take some verbal questions at the end, and we'll try to wrap up around 8 p.m. While speakers are talking, could you please all pay attention to keep your microphones on mute to stop background noise. So with that, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker. Over to you, Stephen.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous in doing this, never done anything like this, so we'll see how it goes. I've put a bit of a background of me. It's a family farm with my mum and dad who've always farmed in Llangollen. We've got two farms sort of either side of Llangollen. We've got Penguin Hall, which is just by Bryncollen, which is where we milk the cows, and Llandin Hall Farm, which is just on the road out of Llangollen towards the Sun Trevor. So they're the two sites that we mainly farm. We're dairy and sheep. We're milking about 110 cows and about 350 sheep. So I suppose the big thing is in 2017, we took the decision to go to organic. That was after going on quite a few farm walks and looking at the land we've got. The land that we've got in Llangollen, and it doesn't suit itself to be high intensive land. It's quite steep and it's not all flat. So we felt that the way forward for us was we're never going to milk 400 or 500 cows on the sites we've got. So I try and do that. You've got to work with what you've got more. And so yeah, we took the organic route. There's no grants or anything to go organic. It's done purely on like on a business plan, because the milk price is usually a lot more stable, and there has been quite a premium on the organic milk price. So that was why we went organic. So it was a 2-year conversion, which was quite a steep learning curve, because whereas before we just relied on a bag of fertilizer to make the grass grow, we really had to start looking at our soils and a lot more into the biodiversity of the grass we grow, trying to put clovers in and things like that. So when we went organic, we joined Glassdeer, which is like a farm grant. You get like a 5-year contract to help do not like public goods, but it's like sort of fence off water courses and woodland to help the environment and protect it. So we're in year 4 of that. So during the last 3 years, and especially last year, we've done over 450 meters of hedge planting, and we have done, I think, 6,000 meters of fencing, which is fencing sort of streamside corridors and fencing the river off to stop cattle and sheep as well, like poaching the riverbank and letting it protect, getting a bit more protection, and putting a nature buffer zone in at the edge of the fields by the water courses. And 6 acres of woodland has also been fenced out at Llandon, just below Castle Dinas-Bran. So that stops overgrazing, and it lets the sort of quite ancient woodland there. So it's quite a unique sort of habitat with I don't know, different grasses and different plants. So it gives a chance for plants to sort of flower, which is good for pollinators and things like that. So coming back to when we went organic, we never used to do much reseeding or much ploughing, but a thing we noticed very quickly was an old ley doesn't grow as much grass, especially without being able to give nitrogen in a bag. So we started to look at multi-species leys, which has got high clover content in, which fixes the nitrogen from the atmosphere in for the grass. But we also put in chicory and plantain in with the grass, which is like a herbs, which help sort of even out you don't get the peak grass growth, you get more of a longer growth season throughout the year. So rather than having all your grass in May, which we still do get a spike then, you get a more even growth throughout the year to try and because you need grass every day when you're milking cows. Then another thing we noticed was you need a break crop, which was something new to me when we came down this. If you go from grass to grass, you get like wireworm and different diseases. So you have to go back to the older farm calendar of you need like a rotation. So what we do, we have to plough a field, which is probably still a big weakness in the organic movement, because that is releasing a lot of carbon. But it's very difficult to do put in a new seed without the plough, because we can't spray it off and do like min-till like the conventional boys do, because we can't use Roundup or glyphosates to kill off the pasture. So ploughing is the only way where we can turn the turf over to kill off the old ley naturally, and then put a new seed in. So another thing we do is we put, before we when we pick a field out to be reseeded, we'll put turnips and forage rape in the first year, which we'll do that. We plant that in about August, and that adds a lot of fertility to the soils. So we'll have quite a lot of lambs that will come back from the mountains, say in August, September, and we'll finish those lambs through the winter behind the electric fence on the turnips and on the rape. But all their poo and all that organic matter from the bulb of the turnip is adding fertility back to the soil. So as well as spreading muck from the sheds, you're sort of using less diesel because you're making the sheep do the work. And then then after the turnips, we plough again in April and put barley and peas in. Well, that's another new thing to us, is we're not just growing one crop, we're trying to grow a couple of crops together. So it's a bit of a safer bet as well, but we're doing barley and peas, and we sometimes do barley, peas and vetch. The peas and the vetch are like a legume, so that like clover, it fixes nitrogen in the crop. So it's helping you get that nitrogen fix to get a good crop to feed to the dairy cows. And then after the barley and peas, we then go in with a 5-year grass ley. So then it stays down to a grass and clover ley for 5 years, which we usually try and have quite a high red clover content in that for the silage ground, which is what the grass that is cut and stored to be fed in the winter. But with red clover, we allow it to flower every August. So you'll see some of the fields, maybe along the canal at Llandon, you'll see like lots of red little flowers from the red clover, and that's a fantastic environment for pollinators. But by letting it flower once a year, you're strengthening the root system, so it adds a lot more perseverance. If you don't let it flower, it can die out in 2 or 3 years. But by letting it flower once a year, It's supposed to like sort of give the plant more longevity. So it's quite an expensive thing to do all this ploughing and reseeding. So by doing that, you can get an extra couple of years out of your lays. It saves money and it's good for nature. So as I said, we've done a lot of hedge planting, and we've just finished doing 140 meters this year. So that's sort of, we're trying to put that on field boundaries to create like natural windbreaks and shelter for the animals. And to do this, I look at a lot of the old tide maps, which you can go on the Welsh Library and look at the old fields. And people in the past weren't stupid. They ploughed a field for a reason, and certain boundaries in certain fields were there for a reason. Maybe it was a part of a field didn't grow that well. So by looking at the old maps, you can half see where some of the old field boundaries were. And there's a few instances where you thought, God, that bit of the field never grows much. And then when you look on the old tide maps, you'll see it was like a bit of old woodland or a bit of pasture. Because I think on the old tide maps, they had to pay like a tax to the town council, well, maybe to the town council or someone, for arable ground. So they weren't just making arable ground willy-nilly. They were picking the better spots. But it's quite fascinating to see how they had that laid out. So what we've been doing this last year especially is I've been working with the AONB on, well, two sites really, with Ros at the Wenfood site, and there's a new project, the Penguin Vale project, where they're going to try and do some silvopasture integration. So I spoke to, I think it was Tom, he came to have a chat with us, and it sounds quite exciting about maybe planting some sorts of trees in the hedge lines and using this to sort of be a good thing for pollinators, but it's a lot nicer to look at than a barbed wire fence or a fence, but it'll add shelter to the fields. And I have been doing some research myself, and there's certain plants, I think like willow and other plants, have like natural like pain relief or natural strengths that the cows can like not graze, but they can browse on. And it's amazing how cows will browse in a hedge, trying to get different minerals or different goodness, I think. So it'll make this silvopasture will make a nicer environment for the cows, and it will also be good for wildlife. So then with the food, we opened a campsite at Llandon Hall Farm in July, and with us having all the milk, we thought it'd be quite a nice idea to do get a milk cut, so a milk vending machine, and do milkshakes. So it's taken us quite a while to get this all sorted, but we're hopefully opening this weekend. I'm just waiting for the card machines to go live. So you can see in the picture the little hut we've built right by the Pocket Park, just on the old railway line. So we've built a pasteurising room on the farm. So we're going to pasteurize our own milk and sell it through the vending machine. So the vending machine will sell glass bottles which are reusable, so people will be able to bring back their own bottle, or they don't even need to buy a bottle, they can use a bottle from home. And I think that'd be quite a good thing. I'm hoping it'll be quite a nice thing for the people of the town, and be quite good for us to get maybe a bit more of a sustainable price going forward, because the milk price is very it does fluctuate quite a lot. But with Ros, we've worked on opening up the old railway line and doing a walkway from town to connect up to the Pocket Park, which they've built, which looks fantastic with the walks up onto the canal and everything. So that's
even 1 minute to wrap up.
Okay. I think I'm near enough done, to be honest. Plan for 2022 is I want to try and do a accurate carbon footprint for the business. There's so many different carbon footprint tools, so that's something we need to look at. And no, I think that was it. If anyone has any questions, if I missed anything, I'm not sure.
Was absolutely fascinating, Stephen. I've got so many questions. I'm going to hold off, and maybe if we can go through the speakers and then come back and open up questions, because there might be a few questions that different people can bring different perspectives to. But it sounds like it's been an incredibly busy few years for you, and a lot of really exciting learning as well. So I look forward to hearing more. If we can hand over next to Duncan.
I'm helping to set up a project in Monmouthshire and the Brecon Beacons called Our Food, or Ein Boyd. And the aim is to find 1,200 acres, that's 1,200 acres across the whole region in small packets, and convert it to modern small farm and regenerative fruit and veg growing, and serving the people who live here in this region and also the neighbouring cities. We have Cardiff, Newport, Bristol, actually Hereford. So we've got quite a few large cities nearby. The reason we chose 1,200 was just a nice number, actually, but the reason is that that would be enough to feed everyone who actually lives here. So we say about a football pitch will feed about 80 families with all their fruit and veg through the season, through the growing season. So that's kind of where we got that figure. The real reason, though, is that is enough horticulture and enough trading in selling to local people to create routes to market that all the farms locally could use as an alternative to selling into the supermarket system. And that's dairy, meat, cereals, and other anything that people buy, basically. But if you're buying vegetables weekly, then you know the person who's selling to you can sell you lots of other things, basically. So we're opening up, recreating a new trading system locally, which has almost completely disappeared since actually the Second World War. It was very vibrant before then, but it's almost completely gone. We face the same problems as every other rural area, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Farmers are very poorly paid generally because the system forces the prices down that are paid to farmers. There's a culture of buying everything in supermarkets. So we all rush off to buy supermarkets. So the supermarkets are becoming very wealthy, but the farmers certainly aren't. There's the climate change problem, which you face, and the leading role that farms can play in counteracting that. And there's the broader problem of the lack of healthy food, lack of healthy eating in our society. So we have a big challenge, if you like, to rebuild something out of what really is a bit of a ruin, actually, because nothing is functioning, nothing about it. So we have to rebuild at every level. So we've set up a body, a community benefit society, which will manage the work and will lead a process of change. And we're launching a campaign. We've been working for a couple of years, but we're launching a new campaign at the end of March. And I'll just tell you what the campaign is, because I think that's the easiest way to explain very quickly what we're doing. So the campaign is directed at three groups of people: landowners, people who live here, and people who are seeking land. So I'll come to the three. To the landowners, we're saying, please, do you have land 3 to 5 acres that you can lease? Do you have a spare 3 to 5 acres that you can lease for a veg and fruit and veg growing enterprise? Or alternatively, would you like to start one such enterprise yourself? You don't need to lease it, but could you do it within the farm? And we're appealing to farmers on the basis of three things. One is a contribution to the community. So this will create jobs. About this kind of farming creates about 1 job per acre. It's quite intensive work in a small space. And also, when farmers are selling to local residents and local residents are buying from farmers, they get to know each other. It builds the community, and that's very evident. I mean, I'm a resident, I'm not a farmer. I know the farmers around here who sell to us, but I do not know the other farmers because I have no interaction with them. They don't, we just don't have a relationship. So it's about building community. We're also appealing them to take up the lead on climate change, because Regenerative horticulture is all about fixing carbon in the soil, building the soil health. And also in terms of the environment, this reduces food miles radically because you're selling basically where you're growing. And also we're appealing them to help rebuild the local economy, as I was mentioning before. If farms sell directly to the people that live around, or who sell directly to people in neighbouring cities, all the profit from the food chain accrues to the farmer and not an intermediary. And that's absolutely key to the viability of farming in the modern day. It's the intermediaries that are making the profit and pushing the price down to farmers. So if we can eliminate the intermediaries as much as we can, then the profit stays local. And also, as I mentioned before, if they're helping with horticulture and fruit and veg, they're actually building a whole market system which they can use for their other farming activities like meat and dairy. Then we're appealing to land seekers. Now, there are people all over the UK who want to farm in this way, but they can't find land. Land is far too expensive, they can't afford it. There isn't a tradition of farmers renting out fields. It's like in a city, if you owned an office block, you would be renting out offices to different people. But in rural areas, there's less of that tradition. We want to build that tradition here, so that there's more of that kind of flexibility, if you like, allowing people who don't own land, who can move in and start a business with small startup costs and don't have to buy 100 acres or something, which is frankly around here in the national park completely impossible. So we're asking them to come here, and in return for that, we will support them in every way we can. We'll help them find land, obviously. We will help them with housing. We will help them with startup finance, because central government, the Welsh government, doesn't provide support to farms less than 5 hectares. So they just don't. So we will have to recreate that support base ourselves. So we're working on that. We'll help farms to collaborate, these farmers to collaborate, so that they reach a size, they become strong together. We'll also be marketing them and promoting local food locally and so on, and create a sort of buzzy environment. The market actually at the moment is good. Every farm that is starting in this area, it sells everything they've got without actually having to do much marketing at all, because demand is way ahead of supply in our region. And we'll also help with policy and planning, working with the National Park Authority, Monmouthshire County Council, so that they provide a welcoming environment. And then the third group are residents, that's sort of the people who care about the local, who aren't farmers, but who care about the climate, or who care about the rural economy, who care about local farming, of which there are many. And we're appealing to them in all the towns across the region. We're looking for 2 or 3 people who will be the sort of champions in their locality, talking to local farmers, looking out for land opportunities and so on. So being our hands and ears really across the whole region. So basically that's it. This is going to be very hard indeed. We are not expecting it to be fast. As I said before, everything is broken. There are the local supply chains aren't there, the local processing isn't there, and the habits, the local habits of buying food aren't there. So all of it has to be rebuilt. But we're going to give ourselves 10 years, and we've set ourselves a 10-year target, knowing that it's going to be quite slow at first. But we think once we start we've got several already. As soon as people start seeing an actual farm, it changes the mood, it changes the atmosphere. So we're sort of going to build on it, create momentum and create exponential change. So that's what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. That sounds really exciting. I was about to give you your 1-minute warning when you said you were wrapping up, so you were spot on time. So points for that. Again, fascinating, and I'd really look forward to hearing Stephen's perspective on some of that as well, and in terms of the challenges and whether those are how you experience them, Stephen. But if we can move on for now to Ros, and then we'll move to questions after that. So Ros Stockdale is from working with the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, and also been working with the Grove Llangollen project over the last couple of years. Over to you, Ros.
So thank you, Duncan. I'm ever so pleased that you came back on and were able to give such a fantastic overview of the challenge that we face, because essentially that is what we're also thinking with the Grove Llangollen project, that we do have this massive shift in how we produce our food locally. So just broadly, I mean, and it's exactly the same as what you were saying, sorry, Bram, that we're looking to increase the amount of food that's grown in the area and consumed in the area. And we do have this sort of target from this Food Policy Alliance Cymru of trying to achieve 75% of the Welsh population's recommended intake to be grown in Wales by 2030. That's massive. It's a tiny number at the moment. I think we grow like a quarter of one portion for each person. So it's a massive increase in what we grow locally. So as you said, it's to reduce food miles, support the local economy, reconnect people. It's wonderful for sort of physical and mental and emotional health, to improve the carbon in the soil, to improve biodiversity, to give people the skills that they need to work there, and to improve sort of community by collaborative working. So I think you covered all that extremely well. So the Grove Llangollen project kind of started in 2020 with a grant application to the Sustainable Development Fund within the AUMB from Llangollen and Dee Valley Food and Drink Group. So the aim there was to sort of look into the feasibility and try and set up a community supported agriculture scheme. So people might not be familiar with community supported agriculture. It's a partnership between the farmers and the people who are going to ultimately consume it. So it's kind of a bit of more security for the growers because they know they've got a market. So it can be a financial contribution that you commit to, or it could be volunteering. So it kind of allows people with less income to actually benefit from the scheme as well. What it does need is a good site. When we were looking for a site not too far from town so that volunteers could get to it, a lead grower with some experience or a lot of enthusiasm and a willingness to learn, and some sort of hub, sort of building where you can sort of sort out the packing of the food and get things organised. So didn't really go very smoothly because we had COVID, which was a big hindrance to people coming out and wanting to do community things. And there were also struggle. We sort of identified that actually there wasn't much of a culture of growing in the Dee Valley. There was a sort of early opportunity, which everyone was very excited about, but that ended up falling through just for personal reasons within for the landowner. So it refocused, and looked at, how we might support a wide range of growers within the Dee Valley. So very similar to what you're looking at, Duncan. There were a number of events held. So, but the most successful, I think, was setting up a small market at Drossy Bikes, which is a bike recycling centre in Llangollen, with very similar ethos to ourselves. So that was bringing offering people the opportunity to bring their excess fruit and veg to be sold, mainly on an honesty scheme. And it was a little bit late in the season. It was sort of September, October time. So there wasn't a huge amount, but it was actually really positively received and worked very well on a very simple basis of sort of honesty box there. So that was really useful. And we also ran a sort of open evening to see about potential growers and who might be interested in getting involved. So our conclusions on the sort of the end of that particular sort of grant funded project was that we actually need to encourage a bit more growing within the Dee Valley and to sort of support that network of local growers, and as in Monmouthshire, to sort of work collaboratively would seem to make sense, and to build that ethos within the community of buying local produce and not just pop into Aldi. And then also, giving support to growers in terms of training, sharing resources, accessing land. So these were sort of seen to be the key issues that we have to address to get things going in the Dee Valley area. So at the moment, we're looking at how we take things forward, and we are hoping to get a pilot to hire the room behind Drossy Bikes and use that as a hub. It could be a different room, but that works really well in terms of location. So we're hoping that sort of having a physical space would encourage people to just drop in and recognise us as a project that is accessible, open to questions, encouraging networking, identifying those issues that people need, identifying the barriers, provide a venue for any training, and also a venue for selling produce when that becomes available. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on that. Robin, I don't know if you wanted to come in with anything else.
Thank you, Ros. No, that was a great summary and yeah, a good assessment of the last couple of years' progress despite coronavirus interrupting initial plans. And just to say, I was involved in the initial setup of the ideas and the discussions with the initial landowner, and but then had to step away. So Ros and the Llangollen Dee Valley Food and Drink Group have done a great job taking that forward. I think one of the common themes that you've both acknowledged, Duncan and Ros, is the time it takes. So I've got some questions, but before I jump in with mine, I'd like to open the floor and just see if anybody has any initial burning questions they'd like to come up with. If you do, you're welcome to either type it as a chat or to come off mute and say. Otherwise, I'll jump in. You can hold yours. So I think really interestingly, one of the key things across the three discussions was really about the amount of learning that we're all needing to do. Sounds like Stephen's got a bit of a head start on us. with 5 years or 4 years since you went organic. But really interesting to think, you know, about that. And I guess, you know, if you're thinking about, you know, for Stephen, other farmers, and Ros and Duncan, you know, more generally in the community, the kind of skills, you know, how can we help our valleys, respective valleys, upskill in these critical areas to try and get the benefits of the organic farming, Stephen, that you were talking about, being more widespread, and then you know, to get people growing and producing veg on a more sustainable basis. So I don't know who wants to jump in with that thought.
I'll give it a go. Yeah, it's a really hard one, isn't it? Because you need to sort of be able to get the land to grow the veg on. It needs to be flat, really. It has to be quite a good field. You can't really put it on a north-facing bank. And that's the hardest thing, is there's actually not that much flat land in Llangollen. When you actually look around, it's hard enough to find a flattish field. And then I know all the farmers around here are sort of fighting for flat fields because everyone's short of growing their own forage for their own animals. So I know that's sort of quite a lot of people after the same thing in that respect. Mm-hmm. And then with the organic thing, that's just like a choice people make, really, isn't it? I think I've gone organic partly because it suited the land that the farmer had. Like, there's no point me putting fertilizer on steep banks, so I wasn't really getting the full value of it. But how to encourage people to grow the organic veg? It's getting, as you say, it's getting hold of the right land to begin with, and I think that's going to be very difficult.
It is our big challenge. Yeah, massive.
Duncan, any thoughts on skills, kind of upskilling and learning, supporting people to learn and apply new approaches?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it. We're doing two things. I mean, first of all, we fortunately, independently of us, a college in regenerative agriculture course has opened up at Black Mountains College. You may have heard of it. And that's opened up just up the road within our patch. So we've actually now got our own college, which is amazing. But I think what we're doing is seeing it in two different ways. To start off with, we really mostly need people who already know what they're doing, because we've got to make a quick start. And that's why we're going to the networks like the Land Workers Alliance network, the Soil Association network. That they have. There's a whole community of people looking for land across the whole of the UK. There's the main support that they need is peer support from people who are already here. So the regenerative farms that exist at the moment, there are about 8 now, I think, about 6 new ones in the last 2 years. So it is growing already, but they're forming into an alliance with each other. So they're sharing things like they're sharing purchasing, marketing, and then they do what farmers used to do a lot of, which is help each other. So when there's a big job to be done, like put up a polytunnel, they all bring their families, pets, food, and have a day of completely together, and they do the big jobs like the harvesting used to be done, haymaking. So that's sort of peer support, but peer knowledge is really very important. You know, people telling each other, and also it's actually very hard at the beginning, and so the sort of peer support, the emotional side of things as well. I mean, I'll give you an example. Neighbours can be quite hostile about a change of use of a field. So if you want to take a grass field and turn it into horticulture, then you can get quite vociferous. Even if it used to be horticulture, even if that very field used to be, the fact that it isn't now, people can get very upset about that. And that can be really hard to deal with. So there's that kind of support. We will start in the next year starting to nurture our own talent. So what we'll start with is school visits. So we'll get school visits to the existing farms, regenerative farms, show them around, and start nurturing a new generation of, people. But that's a long thing. I mean, it'll be years between a school pupil being inspired by a farm and being able to run a commercial enterprise. Yeah, that's a long time. But we need to start that. So there are different phases, is how we're doing it, to build it up. But you're right, there isn't the skill base. It's just not there. It's gone, and rebuilding it is really hard.
Yeah, I think that was one of your last points there. I think is really key. That the rebuilding that skill base is hard, but almost it's the we think that the children in school now it's going to be too long a pathway for them, but that's really kind of got to be the starting point, because if we're not starting with them, we're going to still be trying to catch up with ourselves. And it's something I've talked about with a number of farmers in the valley, that even though I'm from a rural background, most of my life lived in rural areas, not being from a farming family, and also raising children now, I'm really conscious that it's quite hard to get them practical experience in farming if you're not actually in a farming family yourself. And so kind of looking at ways to get those schools involved, I think is a really interesting side thing to consider. Trying to find ways to kind of get young people growing, even at home, and doing that on a wider basis. One of the things in this net zero farming project we've been looking at is a lot of children, even by the age of as young as 7 or 8, can define the kinds of jobs they would want to do and not want to do. And so, if this is going to be a job opportunity, and you touched on the number of jobs that could potentially be available, which I've also seen in the research I've done, it could be a real, opportunity for a kind of modern approach to, to bringing people back into rural enterprise. But you do need to be getting them on board early with the idea that they, being a farmer would be a aspirational activity, and making sure that those career pathways and skills pathways are really there as well. John Palmer.
On a very, I'm sort of very ignorant about this, but I see in Maesmawr, just down from the old youth hostel, we're talking about flat ground. There's flat ground there, and there's sheep on it. Now, whether somebody there, whether it's, I don't know, it might not be suitable, but there seems to be flat ground there and sheep on it, and perhaps, I don't know why, perhaps that could be accessible. And also, if you look at the youth centre field, you've got the football ground, and there's a flat area above that now, on a very small scale, and you've got kids in the play group in the youth centre. Could that be used and get those kids getting involved in sort of digging up stuff and planting stuff in an area that's just grass, for example?
And that was something that Stephen touched on earlier about kind of planting around the edges and getting things growing around the edges of fields. I don't know, Stephen, if you've got any thoughts on kind of how that works for you, how it might be applied in the valley.
Yeah, it's not really growing veg though, is it? It's just sort of planting like corners with trees and things. But in answer to John's questions, those fields I think he's talking about, Alan, who farms those, he buys and sells a lot of sheep, and he rents Tyndall Farm, and he can't get his wagon there, so he gets all his sheep delivered on an Arctic, and he runs them through those fields behind Maesmawr. Yeah, because Andrew the Wern farms fields further on by the old Diuca, and I also think aren't they in the local plan review for potential planning as well?
Which seems crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I think the farmer's going to be quite careful on what he lets go on there. There could be like a potential payday for him, couldn't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think you've hit on a quite an emerging issue really that I've been talking about with other farms in the area around as things are shifting from funding from EU funding to whatever's emerging next, and that the encouragement to be planting trees on the one hand, wider hedges and the biodiversity. There's still demand for increasing housing in the valley. And the possibility of development. You've got additional land for flooding, as we need flooding, and so that is an emerging issue, that you've got all these things competing for mostly what is the flattest bits of land in a steep-sided valley like ourselves. So it's
one policy. I know one policy doesn't. I always think seems a bit bonkers. If you look at sort of a lot of the new housing, they don't put proper gardens in. It's just rubble under the lawn. Like I think it's on Panorama. People can't put veg patches in their gardens that easily. They're seeing on a lot of new houses because they're not putting the proper good soil in and things as well for people to be able to grow. I suppose they could do it themselves, but that's another point as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about this thing about the youth centre? You got this
I like that idea, John.
flat area, and you've got kids going round there. It's not it's not going to be massive, but it's getting kids engaged. We could put trees on, but we're putting trees everywhere. And perhaps that ground there, I don't know how good it is, but it's certainly grown grass. And that could potentially be engaging little children in the whole thing. And somebody going in and helping them, and that perhaps could be a start.
I think that accessibility is key to trying to get people involved. That if if it is something that they're going to have to hike out of town to get to a particular field or particular site, I think that will have barriers that particularly for those that maybe aren't so mobile. So the more that it could be kept in the centre is a starting point. And Roz's idea and Duncan's idea of kind of linking up sites could be key for that at different scales of development, of course.
Good bowling green.
I don't want to be controversial.
On the bowling green. Gonna edit that comment out before we get start a whole new campaign in Llangollen about Councillor Lovelock trying to dig up the bowling green.
There's another one that
you've heard it here first. Yeah, sorry, Gareth, go ahead.
Here's another controversial one: the old tennis courts, which have some trustees up across from Buffer, isn't it? Flat, dead flat.
Get a few. Make
very
nice
good location. Yeah. I believe the trustees have diminished, shall we say, and would make lovely allotments. And it's just a totally vacant space at the moment. Yeah. So if somebody could investigate that, it would be nice to see something happen there, because you could always put it back as tennis courts with good earth underneath in time if there was a problem.
I think there's it'd be worth doing that kind of assessment of different small sites. One thing we haven't really touched on, Stephen, that I was hoping to get your thoughts on was just around if you see any changes in market around supplying local meat as well. So I know that Welsh Government has got a commitment to increase the amount of local procurement, so that organisations like schools and hospitals have to increase the amount of local food in the meals that they're providing. I was wondering if that was something that has kind of come into discussions at all. If you've tried any local supply routes, any experience of how that might or might not work.
No, I haven't really looked at that, to be honest. The lamb, all the trade's quite buoyant, to be honest, on lambs and on milk at the moment. Like I had our old milk buyer just phoned us up on Wednesday last week saying, do you want to come back? Like, we're looking for milk. Like, everyone's looking for lamb and looking for milk quite actively. So I suppose it's the sort of thing when you're not getting the returns from the market, you try looking locally a bit harder. So it's not something I've looked at, to be honest. But I know Abbey Farm sell quite a bit like of local meats, and they seem really. I speak to Aaron, and he said they're really busy.
It's a pity we've lost butchers now, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
really tricky, and if I understand from discussions with Aaron and the butcher that used to work at Abbey Farm, the challenge is often around the abattoirs as well. That so many abattoirs have closed down. That the complexities of trying to get your lambs in the kind of smaller quantities to the abattoir and then to source, whether it be restaurants or local butchers, is also a particular challenge as well. I know I started the Llangollen Food Assembly many years ago, and that was one of the big challenges. Is, you know, the portions of food are relatively small versus loading up a trailer of lamb to take to market. So
it's balancing the carcass as well, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
you can sell like lamb chops all day, but it's harder to sell some of the other parts when you're getting like lambs killed, and then, you know, I think that's what people say. It's quite hard. You have to sell it in half a lamb or quarter of a lamb. And lots of people aren't really sure what to do with it then as well, are they? They'll buy it as a one-off. I don't know. I haven't got much experience with that, so I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, it's good to understand your perspective on it, though, that you see it being quite buoyant. It's I did read the other day that there's more Italian school children eating Welsh lamb than there are Welsh school children eating Welsh lamb. So it's something I'll keep an eye on and come back if that's changing. I am conscious of time and not wanting to take up everyone's whole evening. Is there any other questions anyone would like to ask the speakers? I do think that this whole area is just so important, and while, you know, it's absolutely, as we've heard this evening, is not without its challenges, I do think that you know, there's also huge amounts of opportunities for keeping young people in the area and supporting them with careers. And you know, with the kind of sustainable farming approach that Wales has got with its livestock and expanding horticulture, I do think that, you know, there's a real chance for leadership for the region and opportunities for Llangollen to be part of that. So watch this space. I'm sure we'll be back next year with another webinar and further updates. But for now, many thanks to the speakers for this evening, and to those of you who have been able to join both live and also watching on replay. There is one more webinar in this series on Wednesday, March the 9th. That's going to look at community health and wellbeing with 3 other speakers. And this video will be on the Town Council YouTube page, and also shared on the Chitterlow Llangollen Facebook page. You can follow Chitterlow Llangollen on Facebook or on our website to find out what town groups are up to, and all sorts of other information going on in the town. But with that, I'd like to say thank you again, and have a good evening.